Welcome to Rome. We're doing a Facebook Live from a polling station here in central Rome. We've been here since 7 a.m. when the polls opened. There's been a steady stream of voters for the past few hours. The first people who cast their ballots here were a family. They were heading off on vacation, wanted to cast their vote before they hit the ski slopes. The polls are open for 16 hours here in Italy, so there is plenty of time for people to cast their votes. I'm joined for this Facebook Live by Kay Wallace, who is a political commentator, an opinionista, as they say in Italy. Yes. Welcome, Kay. Thanks for joining us. Kay, you've lived in Italy for 30 years. Right, yeah. Have you ever seen an election like this before?
Well, every election in Italy is different, but this is particularly interesting, let's say. It's more unpredictable, perhaps, than any other election for a very long time, because there are a number of new factors. We have a new electoral law, there are new political alignments, there is no clear winner, no one really knows what's going to happen. Even when we get the results of the election, we may be far from knowing who the next government is going to be.
Let's break it down a little bit for our viewers. This is pretty much a three-horse race, so to speak. The ruling centre-left Democrats, the populist five-star movement, and a right-wing bloc headed by the former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. So let's go through them one by one. The centre-left Democratic Party, they've been in government for some time now, not doing very well in the polls. Why do you think people have had enough of them?
Well, I think if you look at the current economic situation, there is slight growth. Unemployment is beginning to come down, but it's very much too little, too late. I think that most ordinary people are still suffering from the crisis in 2008. They've seen their living standards fall. They don't feel that the PD has got anything new to offer to them to improve their living standards.
Now, the populist five-star movement, they are doing well in the polls. We haven't had any opinion polls for about 2 weeks now due to Italy's laws. But the last polls to be released put them around 28%, which means they'd be the single largest party. Why are they doing so well? What are they offering that people really like?
Well, they're very much anti-politics. They're anti-politics as it stands. So it's very much a protest vote. Plus, they have popular policies that appeal to people. If you look at their manifesto, it's full of wonderful promises that nobody could really argue with. More equality, lower taxes, more money for hospitals, slimmed down government.
Free internet for everyone.
Free internet for everyone. Italy to become 100% renewable energy, all sorts of wonderful things. It doesn't, quite low on detail on many of these things. And I think a lot of people just think, well, the traditional parties haven't done what we want, haven't improved our standards of living, haven't done very much for us. Let's give them a chance.
I've been talking to some five-star supporters, and they really like the fact that they're untested, largely very young people in the party, but that's certainly making some rather nervous, particularly in Brussels, the idea of a populist government. But is there a realistic chance of five into government?
Very complicated. It's reckoned that a party or a coalition would need 40% in order to have a working majority. Now, the last polls showed that the right-wing coalition of Forza Italia, the Lega Nord, and the Fratelli d'Italia, the brothers.
That's the one that Berlusconi's the boss of.
Salvini would disagree with that.
Salvini is the head of the far-right League Party, and there is a bit of a hustle between those two, I suppose.
According to the latest polls, Forza Italia was polling slightly higher than La Lega, but it was close. And they have agreed that whoever gets the most votes would name the Prime Minister. As we know, Berlusconi himself can't stand as Prime Minister because he has a criminal conviction, so he can't stand for another year. So there is rivalry there, yes, but they are the closest to reaching the 40%.
And what happens if nobody gets a majority?
Well, whatever happens, it's up to the President of the Republic, Mattarella, to call on somebody to form a government. Now, fortunately, he's a very well-respected figure. He's very much low-key, very much hands-off, sees his role as purely constitutional, so he's widely trusted across the political spectrum. He will have to choose who he thinks has the best chance of forming a government, call them to the Quirinale Palace and say, go away and see if you can form a majority. Whether he decides that the right-wing coalition, even if it doesn't reach that 40%, has the best chance, or if we see, for example, the Five-Star Movement do even better than polled, the last polls, which is a possibility, he may call Di Maio, the leader of the Five-Star Movement, and ask him if he can form a government.
And the polls close here at 11 o'clock tonight, as I was saying earlier, a really long day of voting here in Italy. We're not expecting results to come through quickly, though. I guess we'll have exit polls almost immediately.
Yeah,
but
by midnight we'll be having exit polls. By tomorrow morning, when people wake up, or some of us will probably be up all night, we should know. We should know what the vote is. But as I said, what the government will be something a great deal longer.
And there's a high chance that there won't be a government, or the situation's very unstable.
Well, it's possible that nobody will be able to form a government. That's the worst case scenario, that you need fresh elections. And that would be bad, because there's no guarantee that fresh elections would produce a clear result. So.
Let's talk a little bit about the mood among the voters. As I said, we're here at a polling station. There are queues of people behind us. Is a high voter turnout expected today?
Well, traditionally, Italy has high voter turnout, although it's been going down progressively in recent years. Nobody really knows. That's one of the many unknowable factors in this election. Another thing that I've been seeing, talking to friends, and this is purely anecdotal, 3 people said to me yesterday that they would vote for the Cinque Stelle, the Five-Star Movement, even though they're traditionally left-wing voters, in order to keep out the right. So there could be an element of tactical voting as well.
And one of the reasons this is so unpredictable is because so many voters, according to pollsters, were still undecided until quite late. They said 1/3 of the electorate.
Well, I've seen lots of different figures for that, from 40% to 60%, but a lot of people, yeah.
So it's, as we keep saying, a very tough one to call here in Italy. One final question for you, Kay. What have been the big issues for the voters as they head to cast their ballots?
Well, the economy is always a big issue. People feeling that unemployment is very, very high in Italy.
Particularly among the young, yes?
Particularly youth employment. I mean, they're boasting that it's getting down to about 33%. That's a good thing, that's down. But no, it's that's the big problem. But the real new issue, immigration, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why right-wing parties like La Lega Nord are doing so well, and why the Five-Star Movement is doing well.
Maybe we could break down a little bit what those two parties, both populist, although very different ends of the spectrum, one might say, how did they view immigration? We've heard Salvini, who's the head of the League, that's the far-right party, saying that he would deport more.
Deport 100,000 illegal immigrants in his first year in power. Now, whether that's practically possible, whether it's legally possible, I very much doubt, but that's what he's saying. Yes, I mean, you talked about them being on different parts of the political spectrum. La Lega is clearly a right-wing party, but they've dropped the La Lega Nord, they've dropped the Nord part from their name, and they're now positioning themselves as a right-wing nationalist party. I think the Five-Star Movement is much less more difficult to place on the left-right spectrum. They are very pro the environment, an area that might be considered more left-wing. They're rather rather anti-immigration, not so much as the League. They are for direct democracy. They'd like everyone to vote for everything via the internet. They didn't support civil unions, though, so they're not terribly liberal on that. So they really can't place them on left or right. No.
Just looking at this, one final thought from an international perspective. As I said, the idea of a five-star government is slightly nerve-wracking in Brussels, but really there's no stable outcome. That's pretty.
If the right-wing will not form alliances with any of the traditional parties. It's unlikely that they would get enough votes in themselves to form a party. Will they? Is that a promise they'll break? So that's not sure. But obviously the idea of something like a five-star movement government is so unpredictable. You know, the cliche, markets don't like unpredictability. And they have inexperienced, they have no experience of government at all. And the main experience they have is the mayors of two major cities, Rome and Turin, and they haven't done very well there.
It's funny because you said earlier it's something that appeals to voters, that inexperience, but certainly for other European leaders that is slightly nerve-wracking, to say the least. Thanks for joining us, Kay. Thanks for joining us here on Facebook and CGTN's other live platforms. We'll be here throughout the day covering Italy's elections, and we should have some results for you. If not by the end of today, then certainly by tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Bye.